Welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today we will be discussing the 7 liberal arts and sciences.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Today on the Working Tools Podcast, we have Worshipful Brother Stephen Chung from Prince Charles Lodge number 153 in Kelowna, British Columbia. Very Worshipful Brother David Colbeth from King Solomon Lodge number 60 in Auburn, Washington. And I'm Matt Appel, and I'm a member of Mill Creek Lodge number 243, and we meet in Mountlake Terrace, Washington. Unfortunately, Jared has decided to move on from the show and won't be with us here moving forward. So we wish him all the best, and I'm frankly very sorry to see him go. But for now, it'll be the three of us, and the how shall we say the high-minded nature of the show. I think will be ratcheted down a solid notch, but without Jared here, and I'm sorry to see him go. So as far as the 7 liberal arts and sciences go, as everyone I'm sure recalls from their second degree lecture, see if I can rattle them off. We got grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. Hey, that's 7. I guess we can sort of go through them literally one by one, and sort of discuss their what they are and their meaning to us. Grammar, grammar's how we talk correctly, right? The practice of right speech and being able to communicate what it is we're thinking, which I'm barely doing at the moment, but being able to get it out to others and to be understood when we're talking.
Yeah,
Does anyone have deep thoughts on grammar?
in the papers that we used and I'll try to remember to post those in the show notes, but papers that we used, that the last line of the section on grammar says that grammar teaches us to speak clearly and concisely. And yeah, there's not only speak, but also understand, read and understand, I think. So it's not just, although we'll get to that later, but logic and, they're all kind of intertwined with each other. But yeah, grammar is important for sure.
Yeah, and it reminds me of one of the things that the coaches, our ritual coaches, talk about a lot is when they're helping the candidates going through learning their new memory work for the first time. A lot of it, they spend a lot of time on the meaning of the words and like says the nuances and in order to help them understand what they're saying and to understand the meaning behind it. And so, grammar's a little more in depth than I originally thought when, you talk about grammar. Okay, well, it's, compilation of words, right? But, it goes a little deeper than that, right?
If I can back up, I apologize, Matt, to step on your toes for an announcement, but to give an overview, our intent tonight is to just talk in general about the several liberal arts and sciences. We might get into a little bit of depth, but really more of a broad scope of the idea of them. And then our intent, if we are successful over the next several weeks, is to really try to dive into each of those elements of the 7 liberal arts with different articles that may be loosely related, but in our opinion are somewhat related to each of those. And so just to kind of give a background of why we're maybe not going to go into super depth here in a half hour in all 7 of them. But I appreciate that, Steve, because similarly, when I didn't start this until a few years ago, but when I was memorizing things, then I think, sometimes I know what the word is, but if I were to go to the dictionary or go to a Masonic book and learn what the meaning is behind it, it would certainly open up another idea of what the ritual is saying or meaning. And then I would find other words in that definition that I think I might know, but want to learn more about them. And I pick some words out of the definition and go a second level deep. And so now you have all these extra words, 10, 15, 20 words and explanation of what that one word means. And so now that I think it really opens up what our ritual and how important our ritual can be, and some of the specific words that are used. There's a lot of unique words, a lot of unique grammar that's used.
Yeah, I think the echo what you two just said, that as with so many things in Masonry, I think when the word grammar was set down, I mean, it's a choice of words that predates Masonry significantly, that it didn't just mean like, I go, you go, he, she, it goes, they go, we go. It wasn't just grammar. It was the vocabulary. It was the sentence structure, the ability to, like I said, get your thought across, and not necessarily just the mechanics of the language always. Or it was the mechanics of the language, but more than what I think of, at least when someone said grammar to me in elementary school, this is not what I thought of always.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The the funny thing I found when we started talking about this is, I'm 25 years now in Masonry, and this is the first time I've ever really even given much more thought to the several arts and sciences as listed in the Fellowcraft degree lecture, to go any more than the fact that they're listed in the lecture, right? And this overview that we found on all of them, never even thought before that rhetoric had to do with the persuasion of people through speaking. That's what it kind of actually really meant. It's like, huh, okay. So now I always thought that, that was more of a, word describing that would have been Machiavellian, right? But, to find that this had that kind of meaning, rhetoric is a matter of persuasion in conversation. I think this is kind of interesting. So I'm looking forward to maybe finding out a little more in depth of each of these.
Yeah, I think rhetoric's an interesting one, because people say, "Oh, that's just a rhetorical question," meaning it's kind of almost a meaningless question. But that's when you say rhetoric, that's not really what I mean. As Grand Orator, allow me to tell you that the use of rhetoric is I mean, I want to get across my opinion using grammar, but I also want to persuade you that what I'm saying is important, and that you should listen, and that maybe you should think about it in a different way, or in the way I'm thinking about it, obviously being correct. So it's it's important, a way to structure an argument and debate and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and that it's really about public speaking, in general. To when you really look at, in this little write up about it, it actually makes me think more about, when I'm practicing for delivery of a lecture. I'm thinking about the voice inflection. I'm thinking about how what I'm saying is going to be received if I say it in a certain way, or if I speak too fast and I talk about it, and it's like, oh well, there's a sentence that I read or I repeated, but how I repeat it is so important, and I never even thought that would even relate to rhetoric, right? But it's funny how these things are now coming to light after all these years, right?
You said something there which it caught my ear. The when you do the second degree lecture, is it literally just a list, or is there like an explanation for each one in your ritual?
No, there's a brief explanation of each one, right?
Yeah, there is in ours too. I was just thinking to myself that I'm not sure I know those exactly. I was going to look it up.
Mm-hmm. All right. And yeah, and now as brief as it is, I mean, it I guess, I don't know why, but I've never really found it, uh, uh, I guess, it's never really drawn me to, digging deeper into it, right? Until we had this conversation about, let's talk about them, right?
Yeah, I was drawn into the last sentence of that section on rhetoric, that skillful uses tact to admonish our brothers, and rhetoric weaves praise to applaud excellence in conduct or deportment. And we're told in our ritual and that we are to whisper kind advice into the ear of an erring brother, and so I think that's very rhetorical in its meaning. And I didn't understand what what rhetoric really meant until we started doing this as well. So it's been interesting research for sure.
Right. And logic, well, I don't know. I was just logic. Everything to me is logical, right? That's, I don't know. I never really thought about digging deeper into it. But yet in here it says, when we advance in logic, we begin to think about proofs of the existence of God. We see the beauty in autumn, and an autumn leaf, and to so intricate and perfect. The theological proof of God's existence that is that design in nature that proves that there must have been a designer, right? Well, okay, what does that really mean? I'm saying to myself, and how does that really play into it? So that's an interesting one in itself.
Yeah, well, as people have probably noticed just from our conversation here, these three all tie tightly into each other, right? It's hard to think of grammar without rhetoric and rhetoric without logic, and none of them really works without grammar to be able to get your point across and that sort of thing. These three are very interwoven, and yeah, being able to say A then B then C is an important part of rhetoric as well. Just being able to have a logical train of thought.
Great observation, Matt. Yeah, that's a good, very good point. I see what you mean there for sure.
I was drawn into the idea of logic drawn back to a piece in our ritual about how the three rungs on the Jacob's ladder, and how faith, hope, and charity, and that it discusses that faith may be lost in sight. And there was a discussion on a Masonic Facebook page somewhere. I don't know if it was which one it was offhand. I wish I could give credit, but there was some discussion about it, that the idea of faith isn't what we think it is, and that you could lose faith. That you were losing faith. And I said, I don't think that's what that means, that faith is lost, that you're losing faith. And I found an article that described it well, in that it's saying that when you no longer need to have faith because you have seen it, it's now proven, you don't have to have faith anymore. It is what it is. It's logical. And so that's where it's logic. You have now developed the idea of and seen the proof of, and so you no longer have to have faith. And so that's what the idea of logic kind of tied back for me on that piece on faith may be lost in sight.
Yeah, I think, faith may be lost in sight, meaning in seeing the thing,
Yeah.
as opposed to from sight, like, oh crap, I don't see it anymore, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I don't know exactly where that comes from, and I should theologically know that better. But if people say, "Well, I don't believe in something," okay, well, but you have faith that I say you have faith that the light's going to turn on when you flip the switch. You have kind of faith in that. But when the light comes on, you don't have to have faith anymore, because now you know the light's on. It's a very simplistic idea of that concept. But now that you've seen it, you've seen the light, you don't need to have the faith anymore. So that's where I believe it's saying faith is lost in sight, because you have experienced it, you have seen it, you are with it, and now you don't need that faith anymore. But until you get to that point, you need to have faith, and maybe build new faith. You might have to have new faith to continue your journey of new and exploratory ideas. And until you have found them, until you have that sight, until it becomes logical.
Yep. I mean, yeah. There's So we're sort of coming up to the end of our period for the episode here. The 7 liberal arts and sciences are, I don't know, traditionally is quite the word, but frequently divided into two groups. Into two groups. The first one being the first 3, the trivium they're called, the tri being 3, and then the quadrivium being the other 4, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. And so these 3, like we said, are very tightly linked. They're very close, flow into each other, and that's why they're sort of grouped together. They're also they're sort of the basis for advancing into the further ones, which is, I think, if I remember from reading somewhere, it's where the word trivial comes from. Or trivia, that it's something relatively minor. It's something basic or simple because it's something that you're familiar with. Because if you know astronomy, obviously you can do arithmetic, kind of a thing, or I guess not arithmetic in this case. But if you're advancing in the sciences, you've obviously mastered these first 3, and that's what makes them trivial, if you will.
Sure, to be able to add and subtract and develop ideas and be, to study the astronomy and music, you'd have to have the basis of grammar and rhetoric and logic to be able to put those together. I would agree with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now we know where Trivial Pursuit comes from, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it's what I got out of the arithmetic section just briefly was that kind of, again, that last sentence is, as science, it's progressively building skill and familiarity through frequent practice. And I immediately went back to, so what we're talking about ritual. It ties back to ritual. Arithmetic, just like arithmetic, you get better with practice. The more you practice, the better you can do your, if you're doing your ones and your adds, additions and subtractions, 1 + 1 is 2, 2 + 2 is 4, 3 + 3 is 6. If you do all those basic things with math, the more you do it, the better you get at it. And I related it to our ritual, and that the more you do it, generally, the better you get at it. But if you don't, you can't, it's not going to happen for you. I don't think, I think a lot of guys think, oh, I see guys on the sidelines often mouthing the words, and I think, okay, well, if you know this, get up and do it. But they don't, because I don't think they really know it. They think they know it, but they don't really know it. Just same thing with arithmetic. If do you really know your
Maybe they're just practicing for when they're going to do it in their lodge.
I hope so.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
This is off topic, but I've often thought to myself,
off topic.
I know, hard to believe on this show, but I've often felt that half of ritual learning can be done just by paying attention when you're in lodge.
Yeah.
Like so many people, the opening gavel sounds, and officers return to your stations, or whatever, go where you belong, and people just like tune out, and then like, oh, okay, 8 minutes later, it's time for me to come back and the meeting's starting, kind of thing. And if you just pay attention, you'd pick up so much of that stuff. But
yeah,
that's me soapboxing again.
Yeah. Well, the what do you call it? The peanut gallery, when you start hearing them talk about, the guy who's doing the piece, or or they're talking about, oh, he missed this or he missed that. It's like, and you're Mr. Perfect, right? And and then every now and then you look at somebody, well, I'm practicing that one, I'm practicing it, and so I'm familiar in my head, and I'm following along with what he's saying so that I can improve how I'm going to deliver it, right? And that's kind of a different outlook on that as well. I'm glad you brought that up, David, because I couldn't figure out the arithmetic one, really, how it, yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't specifically say that arithmetic. Yeah, we're not doing math in lodge generally.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was stretching it, trying to figure out too. And then when I read that, like, oh, well, that to me, it's a skill you learn, just like oration, as they talk about with rhetoric and with grammar. You have to have good grammar. And the more you practice, the better you get. The more you practice your rhetoric, the better you get. You're convincing, and I think they tie back together. If we look at the ritual, the better you do your ritual, the more persuasive it is. Right? If you do a good job, and that ties back to our last episodes of the observing the craft. What is observing the craft? It's about quality, right? It's about excellence. And so the more you practice of all these different things, then you will become better and your quality will improve. So I think it does all tie together.
Yeah. And that's a very good point, because, you know, uh, I've done many or several lectures many times over the years, and, you know, it sometimes seemed that I didn't really feel like I did a good job of it until several years of doing it, right? Because, you know, you do it once or twice in a year, and then, you know, the next year comes along, you got to do it again. And I still, you know, we always get that bit of nerves, um, and then, you know, watching other guys do it several times now, having, you know, the doing it repeatedly, or and they get they improve with time, right? um which, you know, comes back to, you know, that multiplication.
Yeah. If we could skip geometry and come back to that, uh, I think we could discuss that a little more. The other paper we had really goes into depth on geometry and the overall concept. It's a strong belief in the other paper that geometry is the foundation of all these. It's interesting that it's midway, sort of, in the seven liberal arts, and it mentions that, uh, but it claims that it's kind of the foundation of all things. And so if we skip on to 6 on the music, again, going back to our last section, we talked about how sound is a key component of your experience in masonry, and music is, of course, one of the seven liberal arts and sciences. And so that is absolutely a key element. And lodges that don't have some kind of musical component or sound component to their ritual, to their meetings, to their degrees especially, I think they're missing out.
Well, you know, we used to have an organist that in our lodge, and after he passed on, he was never replaced. And, you know, you go to some other lodges and when you're visiting, and they have an organist, and the other lodges, you know, some of them have replaced their organist or musician with um, being on a computer, and they're playing it through the system, so that they still have that musical component, which I find very interesting. But you have to have somebody who's, you know, pretty in tune with that. And then um, I thought, well, that's pretty complicated. But then found out Grand Lodge put out a whole DVD with music for everything. There's, you know, music to go along with marching candidates through their degree. There's music for each of the degrees. There's music for for several different things and reasons, and they're labeled. And it's like, oh wow, so somebody's really gone and put a lot of effort into it. And it does remind me how nice it is when it's used properly, like, for example, in a degree, right? It can make it that much more impactful on someone's mind when they're receiving that, I think.
Yeah, 2 things. Well, I found one on Spotify. It was more generic Masonic music, but it's a little bit labeled for the different sections of the degree and or different pieces of ritual work. But our very own Zay McCune, he and another past grand musician were charged probably a dozen years ago now, or 10 years ago, with putting us together a similar compilation. And I don't, I don't know if they just imagined it in their mind or they timed it or exactly how they worked it, but it's almost to the minute, to the second. You know, when the marshal and the chaplain leave their chair and get to the altar in most size lodges, magically that piece of that music ends. And so it's really, you can just hit click and it'll play that music, and then it'll finish off. And so there's about, I don't know, 15 or 20 little musical pieces that are available. I don't know if the Grand Lodge still has those CDs or not, but I have a copy and have, of course, burned it to my device so I can have it with me all the time and not have to carry a CD with me. But it's really a really perfect. I do personally wish there was a few other longer pieces that we could play for some components, but It works really well. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a copy of that as well, and I'm thankful that there's other brothers out there who are musically inclined and could put that together, right? And somebody said, "Well, you're a computer guy. Why don't you do that for our lodges?" Like, I am not musically inclined. I can't
Mhm.
carry a tune in a bucket. I absolutely have zero for rhythm, right? And so I wouldn't, know which one to use or feel good about timing or anything else, right? And even though they're built, but I'm worried I'd mess up the time to start one and the time to end it if it so unless it's just perfectly built for it, and so as you say, some of them are, right? So I still think it takes a guy who's musically inclined to put it to use.
I think also he alludes in the article about singing, and I do miss the idea that Masonic lodges did a lot of more vocalization, singing, and the different things. We in our table lodges when we used to do them, we would I would kind of force the guys to sing, and I think it really added an element. And after a few years, they got used to it. We don't do table lodge anymore for our lodge, but I think it's a missing component, and it certainly uh, brings up merriment and ideas and fellowship, and I think there's a lot of components to having that music and singing involved in our rituals.
Well, and there's a few of the lodges. So I've been doing the director of ceremonies role in the installations as of late. I don't know why, but they keep asking me to do it. And some of them during the preambulation, some of the guys they just start singing, and some lodges are embracing that more and more. There are specific song sheets that they have, and now they're putting them out on a regular basis to be used. And I don't necessarily pay attention enough to um, figure out the relevance of the verbiage that's included in those verses to the ceremony itself, right? I-
Matt's cheating in the background.
I'm sure there is some relevance there, but
I was trying to look up Masonic music.
Well, the last one before we get back to geometry is astronomy, and I honestly just couldn't make any connections here.
I have a connection.
Oh,
I,
good,
I
good.
really haven't figured out how it works to speculative masonry, but in Kamloops, they have we talk about a star deck canopy. Well, in their lodge, they have the night that their lodge roof was raised, somebody took an image of the stars above Kamloops, and they have copied that and put it onto their ceiling in their lodge room, and they have the little glowing thing dots, and they have the right blue lights or whatever the lighting is to make those things show.
Oh, cool.
And they have a couple of learned brethren who will explain this, and how it came to be and why it's there. And it's just that's the position in which the stars were the night that they raised the roof on their building,
Oh, we don't.
right? And it's pretty cool. I mean, they start talking about the different astrological signs that are in there, and I'm like, okay, right? I mean, I've never really understood it. I got to admit, I have downloaded this astronomy app that you can take your phone or your tablet and you hold it up wherever you are in the world, and it's supposed to show you the stars for that area. Because apparently, when you have a lot of lights in your city, you can't see all the stars.
Right.
And so when you look up and then you look up on your device, it's like, well, we're missing a bunch, right? That's all I could think, right? And then I never really got into it, but when you think about the Milky Way and the different images and astrological signs that are there, I think it's amazing, but I've never really delved into it, right? As much as I've downloaded that app, I've only actually pulled it out twice, right? And that was when we were sitting in the hot tub one night and we're talking about how cloudy it was and we couldn't see any of the stars. And I pulled it out and I pulled up the app and said, "See, there's the stars."
Well,
Oh,
that gives me a good idea. But when this show airs, it will be, I think, the 7th of January, and on the 10th of January, our lodge, our building, our temple will be 100 years old. January 10th, 1924 is when it was when this cornerstone was laid, and so uh, I'm going to try and get a night, if the cloud gods permit. We'll try and get a night sky picture on January 10th above our temple, and that would be a great idea. Supposedly, our ceiling was painted that way as well, and then that got covered up because of some repairs over the years. But interesting. I like that idea. I'm going to steal that.
I know somebody had made mention that they use the stars to kind of tell a bit of, not necessarily time, but
Certainly used
dates.
for navigation and
Dates and calendars.
I feel like astronomy is kind of one of the easiest ones to relate to Masonry. We talk in our ritual, we talk about the luminary of nature progressing from east to west. We talk about the orientation of the lodge from east to west, north to south, and this is a Scottish Rite thing, but I know in Scottish Rite they talk about the position of Venus and the morning star and Mithra and those meanings behind the astronomy. We talk about the circumambulation being a representation of the Earth going around the sun. There's all sorts of cool. The senior deacon and junior deacon use a sun and a moon as their representative symbols. There's a lot of cool astronomy stuff in Masonry.
And whatever, smarty pants.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, very true. Well, that'll be a great section to really dive into then.
I don't know. I said everything I know now, so.
Well, yeah, that's what I was thinking. Okay, well, I only know so much, but maybe we can find a learned brother who can join us on the topic and really expand on it. Because I think that there'd be some very valuable things learned.
I also suspect, I don't know this was a fact, but given the shift in the meaning of words over time, there was a time when astronomy and astrology were not really separate things. They were very much intermeshed with one another, and they're synonymous probably isn't the right word, but they were really close to each other. So I suspect that there are a lot of astrological meanings as well behind things, and to which this alludes. So, having thusly talked about all 7 of the 7 liberal arts and sciences, and left nothing out, and
well, we missed geometry, but I was kind of hoping we come back to that. Yeah,
we did.
We kind of skipped over.
So yes, we've run through 6 of the 7 liberal arts and sciences, the trivium and the 3/4 of the quadrivium, I suppose. And my grammar is failing me. My rhetoric, where am I? So I guess we want to say thank you to all of you for listening on behalf of Steve and David and myself. And we'll come back at you in our next episode here with a discussion of geometry. So with that, thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on the Working Tools Podcast.